So Sean Hannity did a segment on Russia's war in Ukraine, and he said something here that I couldn't believe. I know Hannity is like legendary for being dumb and doing the standard Republican talking points, but this goes above and beyond even for Sean Hannity. So look at what he cites here as a policy success and what he's arguing should happen in Ukraine as a result of it. Take a look.
I go back to Ronald Reagan. He provided, for example, the Mujahideen in Afghanistan, the Stinger missiles. Well, that helped Afghanistan defeat the former Soviet Union in the 1980s. Reagan made that happen. Reagan also provided weaponry to the freedom fighters, the Contra rebels in Nicaragua, to battle Daniel Ortega and the Sandinistas. He was successful there. Reagan never put a single American boot on the ground.
He was citing the arming of the Mujahideen and the Contras as a success story. Now, let me come back to that in a second. That's the meat of the story, but hold just 1 second. Look at that last point also, where he's like, Reagan never even put a boot on the ground. Isn't that great? Sean, I remember very clearly under the Bush administration, you were one of the ones screaming at the top of your lungs for more boots on the ground. In Iraq, in Afghanistan, basically anywhere that you threw a fucking dart on a map, anywhere it landed, more boots! More boots on the ground, more war. We need to do it right now. So wait. Are boots on the ground good or bad? Well, now you're saying it's bad because the consensus is that's World War III. Okay, good. I'm glad. I'm actually glad about that, unironically, that he doesn't want the boots on the ground. But he acts like this was always my position. Okay, no, it wasn't. It wasn't. But it's amazing just how, because this is classic Sean Hannity. He'll say one thing under one administration, another under another administration, and he just acts like it's impossible to go back and check the record and see if he's consistent. So he loved boots on the ground. He loves boots on the ground. Now all of a sudden, no, boots on the ground, not that good. Okay, that's the point I wanted to get out of the way. Now, he's arguing when we armed the Mujahideen, it was a phenomenal success because we beat back the Soviet Union and Afghanistan. The Mujahideen, Al-Qaeda came out of the Mujahideen. We armed Osama bin Laden. We armed radical jihadists who wanted to do world domination and set up a global caliphate. It was as a direct result of that, we eventually got 9/11. We armed the people who became nominally our main enemies in the war on terror. To cite arming the Mujahideen as a success story is astonishing. That's everybody with a functioning brain in today's day and age looks at that as the main policy failure. Like, it's one of the first ones you go to. Remember that picture of, like, Mujahideen fighters in the White House with Ronald Reagan? It's a very famous picture. Now we all look at that like, look how fucking crazy we are. Look at what we do. We just arm anybody and everybody. We have a arms and weapons industry, defense contractors. They're out of control. All these business dealings with all these authoritarian dictators, these murderous thugs. We arm, rebel groups. These are moderate rebels. That's what we said in Syria, too, as we were arming al-Nusra, which is a branch of Al-Qaeda on the ground in Syria. These are moderate rebels. Moderate rebels, what do you mean? They're a bunch of school teachers who you just armed and gave weapons to? Nonsense. Moderate rebels. And now it's come full circle. Wasn't it great when we armed the Mujahideen? Don't you love arming jihadists? Isn't that awesome? Ask the families of the 9/11 victims if that's awesome. Ask them. Ask people who've been beheaded by them if that's awesome. As, by the way, some of the people we armed in Syria did to civilians in Syria. We covered that story. They beheaded somebody. Unbelievable. But he goes even further. He can't help himself. He goes even further. Arming the Mujahideen was good. What a great success from Ronald Reagan. And then he also says arming the Contras was good. Arming the Contras. Guys, so Human Rights Watch has detailed records of what went down when we armed the Contras, far-right paramilitaries. They targeted healthcare clinics and healthcare workers for assassination. They kidnapped civilians. They tortured civilians. They executed civilians, including children. Again, this is directly from Human Rights Watch. They raped women. They indiscriminately attacked civilians and civilian houses. They seized civilian property, and they burned civilian houses in captured towns. He's citing arming them as a policy success. Why? Because, oh, they're fighting the commies, so that's good. See, in Sean Hannity's mind, he genuinely still thinks like Vladimir Putin is a communist. He's trying to spread communism. So he's still thinking Cold War style of like literally anything and everything we could do to defeat communism is great. So prop up jihadists? Awesome. Prop up fascist right-wing paramilitaries who murder civilians and rape women? Awesome, because you gotta beat the commies. That's what he's thinking. Brainworms, dog. He's got brainworms through and through. I cannot believe we've now come full circle to arming the Mujahideen is based. And arming Contra paramilitary death squads is great. But that's where we are. So, by the way, now, I told you, how does this relate to Ukraine in today's day and age? Because this is really important. Now, every reasonable person, who I've seen, brings up, look, Ukraine is being invaded by Russia. Russia is doing an aggressive imperialist invasion. I think a lot of why Russia is doing it, by the way, is because Putin wants that natural gas in Russia. Natural gas was found just off the coast of Crimea in 2012, and then would you look at that, in 2014, they took Crimea. That definitely has something to do with it. In the same way the Iraq war was in part about oil, I think what Putin's doing in Ukraine is about natural gas. I think it has a lot to do with it. It was also found in the eastern portion of the country, in the western portion of the country. Big states, big powerful states do fucked up things, and it's not just the U.S. Because there's some people out there who, they have one point and it always comes back to America bad. That's not, if you really think that's an intellectually satisfying, accurate answer, I have bad news for you. It's not even close to that. So I think that has something to do with it. But, so arming Ukraine for defensive reasons, yes, perfectly reasonable. I get it. It makes sense. They have a right to defend their own sovereign country. I'm all for it. But the problem becomes when you indiscriminately arm them and you just throw hundreds of millions of dollars of weapons at them and there are no strings attached. Because what ends up happening? Well, the Azov Battalion is part of the Ukrainian National Guard. The Azov Battalion, now granted, it's only, about 3,000 people deep, but they're, at least 20% of them are card-carrying neo-Nazis. And my guess is it's actually way more than that. My guess is there are plenty of far-right forces in Ukraine who are Nazis or Nazi-aligned. And, of course, we don't have any strings attached to when we arm Ukraine. So some of the most experienced fighters on the front lines are going to get those weapons, including the Azov Battalion, neo-Nazis. So we are arming neo-Nazis. And, again, Hannity's out here going, isn't that so based? I love arming fascist paramilitaries. I love arming jihadists and Al-Qaeda. And I love arming neo-Nazis in Ukraine. Well, how can this come back to bite us in the ass? Now, of course, I don't think there's going to be like neo-Nazi terror attacks where they fly planes into the towers or something. No. But what can happen, and the more we give arms, the more likely this is to happen, is as soon as there's some sort of, after people, the fighting goes on for an extended period of time, at some point the appetite for the fight goes away, and you will have Putin and Zelensky sit down and try to work out some sort of a deal. And my guess is any kind of deal is going to include perhaps Donetsk and Luhansk being either independent states or being absorbed by Russia. I think any kind of potential deal is probably going to include that, okay? So if Zelensky agrees to that, to stop the war, well, then you could have forces to his right in Ukraine view him as a Russian puppet sellout. And then the situation is ripe for Zelensky to be overthrown violently by some sort of neo-Nazi paramilitary who then fills the vacuum in Ukraine and runs the government and now runs the country. And the more you indiscriminately send weapons in there and they get the weaponry, the more likely that is to happen. So look, we don't know for sure. Things have got to play out. We need to see if and when some sort of peace deal is reached, and everything would have to fall into place. But just understand, the scenario I described is not, some sort of crazy pie-in-the-sky thing that's definitely not going to happen. It's definitely in the realm of possibility. So the fact of the matter is, you should not indiscriminately arm the Mujahideen, the Contras, or Ukraine, because a lot of neo-Nazi elements are in there. And you want to make sure they don't get the weaponry. Again, I have no problem arming them as long as it doesn't go to those terrible forces, but we don't have any strings attached. There is no purging them out of the National Guard. There is no guaranteeing through some sort of verification process that the weapons don't go there. And he's cheering it on. Sean Hannity's cheering on the arming of some of the worst elements in the world, because that's what he does. Hey, y'all, do me a favor and like and subscribe. It helps out big time in the algorithm. Click the bell as well for notifications when videos drop, and watch that video on screen right now. You know you want to.